Hi everybody and welcome back to the latest episode of B2B NAV, and on this episode we are joined by our colleague James, who is an exhibition and event specialist, and our usual Mr. Ollie Brewood, Head of Digital and Tech here at BDB. So we wanted to spend this morning's podcast kind of elaborating on events and exhibitions, given that's James's specialism. So welcome to the B2B NAV podcast, James.
Thank you.
Your first appearance with a beautiful background. So,
well, I hope you like it. I feel there's some positivity in it. That's why I've gone for it.
I think we all need a bit of that at the minute, don't we? We all do.
There's a tiny little light at the end of the tunnel, but it's very bright. So that's why I've gone for it.
That's what we're going to be aiming for at the minute. So there's been an awful lot of disruption to events and exhibition space, which we've referenced on previous podcasts since the coronavirus and COVID-19 outbreak. James, do you want to give us a flavour, I guess, of what you think the main challenges are that the industry's facing at the minute as a result of that?
Well, I guess the first challenge, which is the challenge the whole country is going to face, is slowly bringing people back together. Mm-hmm. And as events and exhibitions are, basically making an opportunity for people to network, be very in close proximity together, have the opportunity to talk about their industry and where their industry is going. Mm-hmm. It's very important to have exhibitions and events so that people can, I guess, continue to create leads in their industry. And I think the gap over the next 6 months or so, if people don't find ways to plug that gap, will be that the leads and the growth opportunities potentially might not be there for a little bit longer. So I think the key thing for forward-thinking businesses is to make sure that they're trying to find ways to at least gain a percentage of those leads, if not find a potential way to gain more.
Yeah. Because I think that's the reality of the situation at the minute, isn't it? I guess in terms of even when lockdowns are lifted and social distancing is potentially relaxed slightly, the last thing that's going to happen really is, from what I'm reading, particularly about the US and across Europe, seems to be events and group gatherings. Certainly over 50 people seems to be, part of Trump's plan that he's sort of unveiled a 3-phased approach the other day. They're not going to be coming back for some time from the sounds of things. So we've seen a lot of events, myself and you, James, have been deferred to the latter half of this year. Ollie, do you think they'll realistically be taking place? Do you think September, October, November? This is obviously only an opinion at this point, but do you think they'll be happening?
It's hard to imagine everything returning back to normal that quickly, because even if the UK gets, our lockdown lifted and things like that, there's so many countries involved. Everybody's kind of got to be pretty safe for travel and for exhibitions to go back to normal. Because obviously the exhibitions we're talking about aren't typically national exhibitions; they're international, with people traveling from all over the world. And if the entire world's not fairly open, then that's going to have a massive impact on how, if nothing else, how feasible the events are to run.
Yeah. And I guess, James, in your shoes, so I guess at the minute we've seen, I guess with a lot of clients, there's a reluctance to kind of shift budget, if that makes sense. So budgets they've got allocated for exhibitions, and because the exhibition organisers for the meantime have deferred rather than necessarily cancelling, there's a reluctance to commit budget to either an alternative area of spend or just in case the show does happen, I guess, because you can't magically find more marketing budget overnight. Have you got any recommendations there for, I guess, how they could maybe make best use of marketing budgets in the meantime?
It is a tricky one. I completely understand why they're thinking like that. Events which are every 6 months or compared to every year, it may be a case that the ones which are every 6 months will be likely to be cancelled, and then the one will feed in 6 months later. Ones which are annually, I guess it's a way of looking at, like Ollie said, picking up on what events will come first, and reading guidelines you can guess and guess and guess, and you can continue to do that. My thought is that industries which have a high impact on the economy and can help the economy grow quicker will get exhibitions back in a quicker basis. I guess industries like, my guess would be things like pharmaceuticals would come back quite quickly because they need to move forward. So it's a very tricky one, but not having, like I said before about reducing leads, I feel it's they have to find ways in the interim.
And
I guess that's the key thing.
And tying into that, Ollie, then because we've said it before, we'll say it again. Certainly, if one thing coronavirus has done is accelerated a lot of businesses kind of digitalization or digital transformation or adoption of digital practices. Surely that's the area where people should be looking to kind of replace those meetings and opportunities to create leads or meet with people. What's your thoughts on that?
I think we're already seeing that. I think we've seen quite a few events, certainly within the marketing space, that have shifted from being a physical event to now we've got our digital event, whether that's just to have replacing that with a webinar in some cases. Sometimes it's been a series of webinars. I've seen a few companies attempt at doing networking, which I know James just raised as a point that's really important. So having a kind of virtual networking via just having a bunch of strangers that were at this event hopping on a Zoom call and things like that.
Yeah.
So we're definitely seeing companies start to embrace different ways of doing that.
Do you think there's a risk here? I mean, question to both of you, but there's a risk here that everybody jumps on the same bandwagons. So by that I mean we are seeing everybody I've seen so far on LinkedIn or most of the social media platforms seems to be some kind of Zoom meeting with 40 people on a screen with the grid format, and this seems to be the social media post of prevalence at the minute, that everybody's putting up about their businesses and how forward thinking they are because they've ran a webinar on a Zoom meeting. How effective can those Zoom meetings really be? It's great.
I think it's an interesting point, and it goes a bit wider than this. I think, I'm sure those Zoom calls will be more effective than doing nothing, especially given the current climate and everything. But I think if you want to be forward thinking, you need to think how you can elevate beyond that. Obviously, we can't go meet face to face. So what experience can we put around that to make that more interesting? The same applies even before this. We were thinking about this with regards to content. People put out blogs all the time, articles all the time. That's the kind of thing where, again, there's so much noise. How do you elevate your content above that and provide an experience that's memorable? And I think the same, like I say, applies to having Zoom calls. How do we take what we can do at the minute and make it a memorable experience that stands out from everybody else?
Mm-hmm. And James, do you think there's a risk, I guess, those clients and prospects maybe that are a bit nervous to maybe try something new and do want to sit back and kind of wait and see what happens? Do you think clearly there's a risk there that they could lose a lot of ground on their competition or in the industry?
Yeah, I'd say it's a calculated risk. If you go on a Zoom call for 20 minutes and something really cool happens, you may remember it. But if you've created something which is different to your competitors and they go on and they see something which is like when you go to an exhibition, you see something which is really cool and you go, oh, that was quite cool. We might go and speak to those people.
Yeah.
If they see something like, for example, if we supplied something and someone saw that on social media and thought, oh, that's really cool, that sticks in a memory more than a conversation, I would say, on Zoom. Yeah. So it's making sure that you're still sticking in people's memories and you're going, well, this could be the thing what fills the now, or it could be the thing what fills the future. So you're forward thinking as well as thinking about the present.
I think
that's the key thing.
I think that's where it comes into trying to recreate the kind of real life experience, I guess, because I don't think exhibitions will ever disappear. I don't think they'll ever be replaced. I think you might see more of a prominence on local events rather than global events going forward, potentially, if people maybe aren't as willing to travel or maybe aren't as willing to congregate in large international gatherings like you get at the large scale exhibitions. However, can anything really replace that face-to-face, that personal touch, that time you get sat with somebody talking through products or services or developments, or even just catching up, depending on what your objective is for attending that? There is such power in that exhibitions, isn't there, James, in terms of what clients genuinely do get out of it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess people go there knowing they're going to bump into people who are like-minded. So it's great if you're into sports, say you want to meet people who talk about sport. If you're into food, you want to talk to people who are into food. So it's a great opportunity to meet people like that, and that's why I can continue to not be concerned about the long term of exhibitions.
Yeah,
the kind of thing that's much less likely to happen. The kind of conversations are much less likely to happen if you aren't face to face. Because if we're having a Zoom call or whatever call you might be having, you're probably going to stick to the point and then jump off the call. Whereas in real life, we're going to have tangents, we're going to have conversations, and we're going to get to know people on a more personal level, which is just going to strengthen that relationship.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess, there's an awful lot of people either adapting or pivoting or trying to pivot at the meantime into kind of online events, as I will call them for the meantime. Quite broad brush and to varying degrees of success from what I can see. I guess, Ollie, in that space, I've read all sorts of stats that people are more likely to engage online because there's less nervousness about approaching a stand, which I know some people do find that quite a daunting experience. That there's longer maybe dwell times on people having the ability to consume content online because people maybe feel a bit more pressured on the stand by people and attendees and so on. What's your thoughts on that kind of virtual space for the meantime? Do you think it could ultimately plug the void of exhibitions, or do you think it's a temporary spike whilst tools are down?
I think it's an interesting one. I think in a way, is it going to help plug the gap at the minute? There's no doubt about that because we can't do events. And I think we've talked about this previously, but even when events resume officially, I imagine there's still going to be some hesitancy for a period of time about travel, about whether companies have enabled their employees to travel. But even when all of that passed, then I still think we have to consider that there's been an audience that's probably been quite neglected for a while, which is people that can't attend the events, people who companies will only pay for 10 people to attend the event when maybe there's 30 people that really wanted to go. Things like that. So I think there is a space for something of an ongoing virtual kind of event category that probably isn't used widely enough at the moment.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, sticking with you all for the meantime on that I've noticed is it's bringing more prominence the virtual or online event world of the need to complement it with digital amplification and promotion pre-event, I guess, because at an exhibition, as you'll know, James, it's much easier to go with kind of a and hope approach of build a stand and hope somebody walks past. Whereas when you're doing some kind of virtual or online event, you don't promote it. Nobody's there, are they? Putting it bluntly, which I know sounds basic. A lot of clients seem to really take it. No, a lot of clients just seem to be taking that as a learning, is what I've seen. So yeah, go on, Ollie.
I was going to say, with an exhibition, especially based on previous year statistics, that it's likely to have a footfall of 20,000 people. If you set up your own event or a webinar or whatever it is you're doing, there's no inherent audience that's coming to that. So yeah, you do have to kind of start from scratch and drive it.
Yeah. And James, have you seen much on the virtual or online event space so far? Have you come across anything you know that you think they're doing well or not doing well in terms of trends or technologies or?
Well, it seems, to be honest, I follow, as I say, being in exhibitions, I follow literally every exhibition company. I follow all the people involved in the industry. And you see a lot of posts and you see a lot of written information. You see people saying virtual. However, you don't really see anything as such, which is actually like actual content.
Yeah.
So I think we're in a bit of an interim period where there is a gap where people may be working on it in the background and there's probably things going on. However, we're not seeing anything yet. And I think once we do start seeing things, we see the couple of companies doing it, especially if any of the big players start doing it.
Yeah.
There might be a quick follow from a lot of other people.
Yeah.
So do companies go, let's go first, or do companies go, let's wait? And I think to be forward thinking and use an initiative, I feel like they've got to take calculated risk with the budget. There are always going to be risks at the moment. So making sure that risk is well calculated and well thought out.
Yeah.
And do they go first on virtual stuff? In my mind, I think it'd be quite a good idea because you see everyone talking about it and we're all speaking virtually. It's like the new word, furlough and virtual. They're like the two new words that we talk about in society at the moment.
Yeah,
so
probably in that order.
Unfortunately in that order. So we're probably getting, it's like when they went toilet roll first when the first week of lockdown and everything else changed. Maybe there's a good chance it potentially will be a few weeks where virtual takes over, especially as key events start going on in May and June.
You think, I guess, tied to that, Ollie, I'll come to you first in the sense of I've seen some of the price points of these virtual weeks or days or offerings, I guess. And it seems like people are almost lifting what the pricing model is from a physical exhibition and trying to apply that to a digital environment, let's call it. And by that, it's a general sweeping statement, but from what I've seen so far, it's exceptionally expensive and pricey to participate in some of these early.
So that's for a virtual exhibition, right?
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, it just seems almost penal. And I think I think from a client's perspective, when you haven't got a physical stand to see that's been built, there's a mindset shift required, or a pricing point shift, I should say.
Especially if you think about obviously there's profit being made by events companies, that's why they run them. But there's also a lot of costs associated with having this digital event in terms of the physical space and all the coordination, all the staff that need to be there. Now, obviously, for a virtual event, there's going to be some development that needs to go along with it. But if you think about that fee multiplied by the amount of attendees, is it really going to equal the same amount to develop something? Because I'm imagining events companies are making a fairly large amount of money for when they hold a large exhibition and they're charging floor space per stand.
Yeah.
Imagine it costing the same amount to develop an online presence.
And I think the same with the ticket prices for the attendees. From what I've seen, again, the attendee point of, if you'd like to attend the exhibition or attend the event or the week or the day or whatever is being put on, they're almost the same as what it would be to go to the physical event. And maybe that's the right pricing point. I've not looked into it enough yet.
World, isn't it? Because if you're in exhibition, if you have a stand, I was going to say exhibitionist. That's the wrong word.
Definitely not that one.
If you've got a stand in real life and you're expecting to get X amount of business from it, and the online world can deliver the exact same amount for you, then what difference to you does it make how much you're paying for it, as long as there's parity there. But in this world, we don't know if we're going to get the same amount of business from it. We could get more, we could get less, and it could be all that money down the drain. So I think it's tough because it's such an unexplored space. We don't know what to expect. We don't have metrics of what's our ROI, how long are people going to spend looking at our stuff, and so on. It just make it a really big unknown for people to venture.
And I think normally you'd have that natural evolution of this if this is the space we're moving towards, but because it's been thrust upon us, I think everybody's, again, that little bit of nervousness, or I guess nervousness is the best way to put it, or a bit shy about maybe committing the spend to it. I guess it's linked into the virtual space and exhibitions and events, James. I guess sustainability is a huge trend. If you can use the word trend, but I mean, I do for sustainability, but also it's, a movement that people are embracing and looking to champion and promote within their own business. Exhibition stands, we've already seen moving in a more sustainable direction. Is that a big selling point of moving towards the virtual events online kind of offering?
Yeah, I guess so. It's interesting because I'd say probably more than ever over the last 2 years, I've heard clients saying, how can we make this stand environmentally friendly? Yeah. Obviously, you're creating loads of wood, you're creating loads of graphics and everything to go around the world. So it's interesting that this has sort of come up, I guess, at the time where that was starting to become a big factor in the industry.
Yeah.
I guess thinking probably until back end of the year and into next year, that will be one of the key factors when we're creating stands. We're going, this is made out of that, can be used there, and you're getting that much benefit out of one piece of equipment instead of using one piece of equipment, and you go with the traditional term build and burn. Yeah. I'm sure once virtual events do kick in over the next couple of months, which I do think they will, even though we've discussed it's a bit of a TBC, that people will be asking questions about how you're using the same data in the background. So it's always the same kind of evolve, and it'll be a pattern where it does happen. In regards to sustainability as well, as I say, the environmental factor is obviously a big factor in exhibitions and the challenges we do face.
I think also, as well as the stand, you've also got the cost and expense and environmental impact of getting people to these exhibitions. When you think you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of people descending on some mesa, wherever it may be, it's the implication that the carbon footprint of traveling to them, but then also all the tourism, all the spend in the local markets that's missing if those events aren't going to be on. And I think for that reason alone, it is why I can't see them ever disappearing, because they are such a large player in the kind of in the annual events calendar, aren't they?
Yeah, it's like the competitive nature though. Like one country's doing events and bringing loads of tourism in. For example, the US they open the borders, they start doing events, they get loads of tourism, they get loads of business, X things happen. other countries are not going to let their economies grow, don't shrink, sorry, while other economies grow. So
Yeah.
obviously it's a great world to be in. It's an exciting chapter next because it's new. It's
Yeah.
Obviously traditional exhibition stands have been done in a way for years. People had started to look at changes.
Yeah.
How we approach this after will be dictated probably by a little bit of the market and also about being creative with our ideas.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key factor now. And then obviously making sure that we're hitting the key words, which like we've had just seen virtual and furlough come in, there'll probably be some keywords at the back end. So we need to make sure we're hitting those factors.
Yeah.
I guess that's the key challenge, to make sure that we make other people feel comfortable and also we know we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Ollie, do you think when physical exhibition stands are allowed to come to the forefront again, do you think there's a possibility that there'll be smaller people who will be embracing more digitalization on stand experience as well? Do you think that
I
will?
guess it depends, and I'm sure it's going to vary a lot from company to company in terms of how they're doing financially. If a company's managed to thrive at the minute, as a few have, then I'm sure nothing will be affected. But I know a large number of companies are obviously having to dial back things, having to furlough staff, having to seriously look at how they can financially plan for something that's kind of going on for an indefinite period of time.
Yeah,
might mean that when we come back, there's possibly fewer companies to exhibit, but also they might have to think more wisely, I suppose, about how they use their spend. So that could mean smaller stands. It could mean looking at other ways to save costs, which could be using digital collateral and things like that, instead of getting hundreds and hundreds of documents printed in every different language that you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, yeah. And James, do you think there's a potential here that it could impact the kind of logistics, arrangements, bookings of exhibitions? Because as you know well, lots of exhibition stand spaces are almost booked 12 months in advance these days. As one exhibition finishes, you're almost booking space for the next year, committing spend. There's an awful lot of cost that goes out the door many months in advance of an exhibition. Do you think there's a risk that those timeframes will be shortened because people are more nervous to commit so far in advance, given we've seen what a pandemic like this can do?
Yeah, I guess so. And I guess if things do become later and we're building stands like 2 months before, like we're designing stands 2 months before, if not tighter, I think a lot of people will, like a lot of companies, agencies will look to use local suppliers. One, to reduce the trucking and that kind of cost as well, so that comes out. And also to reduce the travel for people. So those kind of things could happen. And I think that'll be the key part, is making sure the supplier network across the world really will be able to meet that challenge. And we'll be able to prove that to clients that we're taking it on. And as I say, I think sustainability and environment might be the key words in the 2021.
Definitely a risk of that. And then I guess from my side, what I've been working on in the background with various clients and contacts and new business prospects is a lot around the legals. So on these sides as well, with I don't know about you, James. I've seen very few shows over the years be cancelled, let alone postponed. So it's kind of a bit of a new world there as well. And I think the cancellation clauses that are typically included in the events framework agreements or contracts probably aren't robust enough really to cover us for this kind of I think is what most people are finding for the meantime. And then you've got clauses like force majeure clauses, so reasons for cancelling outside of your control, which again, things like this, like pandemics, aren't particularly defined in those clauses either. So as a tip or a word of advice for anybody, as a client, make sure you're checking your terms and any contracts you've got signed with exhibition stand builders or providers. Understand your cancellation terms, understand what you're on the hook for, depending on the time frame up to cancellation. And also, finally, see what's in there for postponement, because postponement clauses aren't that typical, is what you tend to see. Is what I've come across so far anyway. And then finally, the force majeure, I think it will force that to the top of the agenda for any new contract negotiations or revisions going forward. And I don't know what you two know about this, but force majeure was typically a clause that was overlooked in most of the contracts that were signed. It wasn't, nobody really paid a great deal of attention to it because you kind of hope you'll never have extreme weather conditions that force you to not be able to attend an event.
Taking out the Excel in London.
Well, yeah, exactly. But unfortunately now, I think the procurement conversations and the negotiations will become even tougher on that level as well. Okay, shall we finish up with some predictions? James, let's come to you, the font of knowledge on exhibitions. When do you think we'll see the first exhibition back being live, a physical exhibition, large group gathering? I'm thinking, an INCOS, an FIE, something of that kind of scale. Do you think we'll see them this year?
I'm going to be positive because
Yep.
I like to be.
Yeah.
Guidelines are saying now, September.
Yeah.
I'm going to say October.
Okay. Yep. Ollie?
It's a really tough one, isn't it? I'm just going to go with November. I'll be a bit more pessimistic.
Okay.
Matt?
I think my gut feel is that time of year. So I know that's vague, but in the sense of I think we will see some events this side of Christmas, which is the main thing. I think that'll be required to restore a bit of confidence in the marketplace. So it'd be interesting to watch this space, and maybe we'll do an updated podcast as and when we know more and when we've got anything else we can share with clients. So thanks very much, guys. Thanks for featuring this week. Enjoyable episode. Feel free to check out b2bknowledge.com. Our online content hub with all our content ungated to help our contacts, prospects and clients navigate the ever-evolving B2B marketing landscape. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.